we go back enough for you to know the kind of person I am, and it's like we're trying to do something meaningful at the same time to have fun. And I guess every interview is theoretically trying to do that, and people will say that, but at least here we we share some history, and you can trust me on that.
Thank you, brother. No, I wanted to kind of come in cold, but I know you well enough that it would be there would be some depth to it and some meaning, and it would be a good conversation for sure. So awesome. Nothing's off limits.
Okay.
All right, so let's get down to it.
This is Podcrushed,
the podcast that takes the sting out of rejection, one crushing middle school story at a time.
And where guests share their teenage memories, both meaningful and mortifying. So I just want to start off by asking you if you could paint a picture for us of what you were like in middle school.
Well, yeah, it is an interesting time for everyone, right? I mean, I was born in Lubbock, Texas, which is a small town in West Texas. Don't remember it. My first memories were in Oklahoma City, very small town. My dad's parents are from there. My mom and dad met there. So my earliest memories are playing in that red dirt out there in Oklahoma City. But my dad did med school. He had me when they were very young, like 2021. They just gotten married. So he was trying to get himself through med school. He did that successfully, and we moved to Minnesota for like four years. So I was just moving from being in Minnesota and making kind of my first like two best friends. I'm talking early 90s, bikes, doors unlocked, riding bikes everywhere, animated.
So
Batman.
Wait a second, just to be clear, you went from Oklahoma to Minnesota to Texas. So because I think of you as like so Texan. By the way, in the best way, because like I mean, I've.
What does that mean? These days?
That reveals a bit of my bias, maybe, but not against you. I really do think of you as so Texan, but wait. So about what age were you coming into moving into Texas?
Well, we moved from Oklahoma, which was still, I had a pretty heavy southern drawl still down in Oklahoma, actually, and then I moved to Minnesota when I was turned 5. And then I was like on the cusp of being 10, like the summer right before I turned 10, we moved back to Dallas, back to Texas.
Okay.
But I do remember in Minnesota being 4 or 5 and realizing like I'd moved to this place, and I remember having like a bit of an identity crisis, even at that age, like very aware of like, well, what do I relate to? Am I am I like Minnesotan now, or like, and like saying pop or do I relate to these people? I remember feeling like who am I, at that sort of age, which was interesting. So, I wanted, even as a kid, we want to sort of, find that attachment to our identity of where we grow up. And
yeah, for sure.
It was tough to leave those two best friends as well when I was 10. So that was a big turning point, because life had been pretty idyllic in Minnesota, and then to move, to Dallas, and my dad still wasn't making, a ton of money, but he was basically ended up spending what he was making in his new job in Dallas to put us into a good school. Mm-hmm. So we went to this sort of, it's really K through 12, kind of a college prep school down there. I started in the 5th grade. My sister was 3rd grade, but that was the first time I remember being a little bit like down, where it was a tough obstacle to, so a lot of these kids had kind of been, at that time in 5th grade, they'd sort of been together since, most of them since at least 2nd or 3rd grade, maybe, you know what I mean? Yeah. And so I definitely felt like that for the first time, that pressure to like to fit in a way, as one does when you turn 10. But yeah, and so it was weird it was definitely interesting making friends now that I think about it. I mean, I met my best friend though at like they did have these a good program where an older kid kind of comes and you hang out at their house.
At their house, wow.
And then there's like a meat, like a mixer or something at like a hamburger place the summer before you go in there. And I actually met two of my best friends in my age, in my grade at at that thing to this day. I mean, that those two guys were like two of my best friends throughout my high school, that middle school, high school experience, which was invaluable. You know what I mean? And it was interesting. It was a small school, like 100 kids, 110, 20 kids a grade. So even the middle school, you know, being 4 grades was pretty, I guess, relatively small. You know what I mean? But
how many kids are we talking? Like 60 a grade or a class, or less than that?
Like 100 to 120 probably.
Yeah.
Per grade, or was that in the entire middle school?
Per grade.
Okay.
So like 400 to 500 kids.
Yeah.
Okay.
You know.
That's big enough to feel like the world when you're that age.
Right.
You know what I mean? I feel like when you're that age, that any smaller, you could have a sense of, like, I went to the years I did go to middle school. Chace, I don't know if you know this, but I technically dropped out of middle school. I don't know if we ever talked about this.
I remember you telling me that. Yeah. I do remember you telling me that. Yeah.
So, but the bit I did go, it was quite small, and it was like a little private school, and it felt insular. But I'm feeling like, you know, and you're saying you went to this prep school that was, so it was it the kind of place where kids would go on up through the high school and then go to really good colleges?
You know what? For the most part, like at the time, I wasn't really cognizant of all that. I do know the workload was
it a lot?
Was a little bit a lot. It wasn't like as crazy now that I can see it in retrospective. Other schools out there, you know, there's some that are a little bit more rigorous. But to be honest, as I got deeper into high school, I realized that most kids basically just stayed in Texas, and that was the one thing I remember realizing, was that, like, I wanted to get out for at least 4 years, you know what I mean, and experience. Yeah. But that's a different story. But I was older, and I remember going to, like, randomly California for this one thing. I went by myself, but I remember stepping off on the plane and it was like Santa Barbara, and feeling so free because I was by myself and like walking the streets of this new place anyway, and being like, I need to, you know, I don't want to get stuck going to one of like the same 4 or 5 colleges that everyone's going to, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You had aspirations.
Yeah. You know, but in 5th grade, you're just trying to, you know, read Matilda and get through, you know.
Wait.
Listen, bro, I never read Matilda. Okay?
What? You didn't?
You're missing out.
Yeah.
No, I just
never read it again last week. No,
so good. Chace, I'm wondering, I feel like we learn so much about ourselves through, like, our most embarrassing middle school stories. And I'm wondering if you can call one to mind, like something that happened to you in middle school that you never forgot.
God, I'm sure my mom could as well, but I do. I mean, I don't know if it was one specific story. I just do remember, God, there's awful pictures. So my mom thought, I mean, she always wanted me to try and fit in as well. Not try, but like she wanted, like, if whatever, like, we all know what was in at that time. It was Jinkos. It was like Doc Martens.
Yeah.
And she did. It was her idea, but I was down with it. And we did do the cap and the hair pulled through the things like that, and like the bleach. Like the really
wait a second.
Sync, sort
You
of.
got like frosted tips.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So
Frosted
I thought
tips.
so you had frosted tips, but that doesn't mean, when you said the hat with the hair pulled through, I was like, you wore a hat with your hair pulled through?
No, like to dye it.
Like to school? But that's not what you're saying.
Your mom was trying to make you fit in?
And I was thinking to myself, I'm like,
better.
I was like, I missed that trend. Was that, did one of the...
It was specific to Dallas.
But I had, I went through the braces phase with like the puka shells and the bad Abercrombie t-shirts.
See, I aspired to that. I wanted to look good with a puka shell necklace and the Abercrombie shirt, but yeah, I mean, I didn't quite get there until I was.
I'm sure you pulled it off.
And I just recently learned through a documentary that you worked at you were an Abercrombie model.
No,
someone like said
I wasn't a model, but I did work at the store in the local mall like 1 year in high school. But I was obviously underage. But yeah, I was like, can I at least just do something? I need something to pass the time. Can I work the cash register? So I made them put me behind the cash register, and it was one summer of inhaling that awful cologne. And I was done.
That's amazing.
Same playlist. It's like literally like it's like water torture, like the same bad playlist. Every day.
That's amazing. But I have to say, Nava, you said Penn worked at Abercrombie.
Well, there's like a documentary about Abercrombie that has a picture of Penn on it on Netflix.
Oh, Penn worked at
no,
Abercrombie.
As a model,
no.
they
See,
have
that's not true either.
when Penn.
I love to learn that you did too, Chace.
No, I did one when I was 17. I did a photo, like a photo shoot in, God, where was it? I think it was in. It was, geez. I mean, it was a bizarre experience. I think it was in Nicaragua, and we flew into this resort, and it was the one time I ever had this like model experience. I wasn't ever able to model any other time, but
a brief window.
Yeah, and so people think that I was in an Abercrombie.
Well,
Fitch
that
catalog
movie is
as a
using
model.
your image. They're using your image on that documentary.
Oh my God.
Yeah, so
You could
I mean,
sue.
if you read there's a little blurb next to it that says it's something about, I don't know. It was like there was like a brief little interview, and I was there with a few other actors, and yeah, it was definitely. It was a funny experience. I remember it was the first time that I was wearing a white T-shirt and was asked to pour. Well, I say first time because there was only one other time where I was wearing a white T-shirt and asked to pour water on myself, and I was just, it was so. What's the word? Is it traumatizing? No, it's it was just like such a joke in my mind. I was like, really?
As a young kid.
Have you ever had that, Chace? I mean, I was 17, which is not like a young kid, but it's young.
Mm-hmm.
That's very young. Like to feel like objective. I did do a little modeling, like dabbled in Dallas in when I was like 16, 17, and made a little bit of good money for that age. But it does feel so hollow. You know what I mean? It just feels like you just feel so like used and weird. I mean, it's,
especially I remember when the photographer just kind of like nodded and pointed and was like he motioned to like his assistant to get the water, and then
wow.
Right.
Well, yeah, I don't remember if I had to pour it on. I think I might have tried to take the bottle so that he wasn't pouring the water on me.
Yeah.
This is
Right.
I hadn't blacked this out, but I have not revisited the memory, and that was definitely, I think it left a bad taste in my mouth for modeling in general.
Of course. Yeah. That's terrible. So like the water and the wet T-shirt thing. I mean, yeah, that's a little bit scarring. You know?
Yeah. I mean, like if I was a woman, I would have every right to say that was like unfair and wrong. And but as a man, you're like you're thinking like, well, I'm desirable, so this is kind of rad, right?
Yeah.
Right.
You know, on TikTok, there's like not a resurgence. There are a bunch of intimacy coordinators from Hollywood who are becoming pretty well known on TikTok and posting videos about what it's like in that industry, what they do with actors to help them through intimate scenes. And then there are other actors who will come on and talk about how much they wish they had experienced that, they had an intimacy coordinator. And just thinking about, like, from the little I know of Penn having to do really intimate scenes on you, I know both of you had to do intimate scenes on Gossip Girl. I'm wondering, I have been thinking, like, for women, I think it's a little bit more acceptable to speak up. It's hard, but it's becoming more acceptable to say, this is making me uncomfortable. And I wonder if that's also the case for men, or if there's more of an expectation that you'll just go for it, no matter how uncomfortable it is.
I will say, I think you're right on that. That I think it's changing, but I do think the expectation is there with that, where they're just like expected to sort of, be put in a corner, like, oh, do it. They're good. He's good. He can do whatever. But I will say this past season, which we shot 21 in Toronto, it was the first time I'd worked with an intimacy
it's a
coordinator.
hard one.
Yeah, still
and
hard
she
to say.
was amazing. Yeah, she was so great. And we just basically took a time, an hour or maybe an hour and a half, a day or two before the scene. And it was nice to get it choreographed. Mm-hmm. And I mean, literally choreographed and also kind of block the scene, rehearse the scene. Hey, and even the actor, it was so natural with the actress. She's amazing. Katie Breyer. Yeah. It was just, I'm going to do this now. And it was just, so when you show up, it wasn't like, okay, block and here you go. And then reaction, and it wasn't like a surprise. I think those things, especially dealing with something like that, it has to be choreographed, and it was just so much nicer to have the coordinator come in before. Are you good? This is what you're going to be wearing, here in this, in this situation. I was like, this is awesome. It was very comfortable. I'm like, how has this not happened since the dawn of, of film? It was just so great. So I'm a big
because
proponent.
cinema has its origins in exploitation of people, is why.
Wait, while we're on this topic, I definitely didn't think would ask this so early, but I have been reflecting. I feel like women in podcasts and other interviews, I often hear people ask women their thoughts on the Me Too movement and whether it's changed anything. And I've never heard an interviewer ask a man that question, and I think it's relevant to both men and women. So I'd like to ask both of you, how do you feel about the Me Too movement? Have things changed? Are they changing?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely see the changes. I think it's just good to be honest, to bring stuff into the light. You know what I mean? Like, why does all these things need to be covered up? Why are people, and all the enabling, that's happened, and sort of abuses of people in positions of power? I think it's fantastic that conversation has been happening. I think those things are slowly being dismantled. I mean, I know it's probably not a perfect process, or it's can maybe be messy in one way or the other, but it's for the best to bring that into the light.
I mean, probably even the fact that intimacy coordinators exist is probably
that's definitely a product of that. It definitely is. Yeah, right. I mean, there's no doubt. Like, I mean, I find it's even the presence of an intimacy coordinator is kind of interesting because it reveals how vast the spectrum is of the way people feel about this stuff and the nuance involved. Because my experience has been like, on one hand, it can be really, really great. And this speaks to the Me Too thing too, because I think this is the context for it. I mean, Chace, you've been in the industry for a while. I know for me, I've been in it longer than I haven't at this point.
Longer than me too. I know you did music and stuff too, man. Yeah.
Well, but so music is its own thing, I guess. But I mean, just realizing, I've spoken about it a bit on this show. I hope it's not redundant for anybody listening, but it's something that is dawning on me. I think the older that I get, and just seeing all the different relationships people have to it, is it. I know so many people who've like had their first, so many meaning like probably at least a handful, if not more, who've had their first kiss on camera.
Wow.
So young that they had their first kiss on camera.
That's so crazy. Yeah.
Which is interesting. It's very interesting. My voice goes. I'm trying not to just put it all down to the ground. It's what I'm trying. I don't want to sound cynical or contemptuous. I'm fine. But it's really, there's just what I'm trying to say, and what I'm realizing myself at 35 years old, having done this since I was 12, is that just when we talk about things being systemic or cultural, that's so deep, And so when we say #MeToo, or we talk about intimacy coordinators, it's like, these are great things to point to say so many people are seeing that there's like this history of exploitation and abuse, but I find it's just not that, as you were saying, Chace, it's like it's imperfect. I mean, it's like, it's just not that easily addressed, because I find sometimes that if you yourself know how to establish some kind of safety and protection and good boundaries around that experience, I've found that sometimes an intimacy coordinator can almost belabor a process that sometimes would be best just like not focused on so much. And then there's times where a scene really requires it, and it's very much like a safety, and it's a great measure. So I've seen it kind of help, and I've seen it hurt, but that isn't really so much speaking to. I mean, intimacy coordinators themselves, I think, all say, it's new and we're learning, and they're doing the best they can. And what I see in general is that they're just all incredibly well-meaning, and incredibly thoughtful.
Yeah.
Right.
Anyway.
Yeah.
That's that.
You probably dealt with it more than I have on your show. I only had like a couple scenes last year.
Yeah,
My show's weird. One was with an octopus.
I was about to say, didn't you have a scene with like a sea animal?
Yeah. Right.
Walk us through it,
Exactly
Chace.
what
How
I
did
signed up for
you?
when I got in the business. I'm like, I've made it. This is exactly what I knew I wanted to do. But no, but yeah, that was always interesting. So there was like at least a laugh and a smile with that coordination.
Yeah, you just.
But-
have
Wait, did
to.
you actually get that coordinated?
We did get that coordinated. Yeah.
But that's real, because like I have
Somehow.
scenes where I have to fake masturbate.
Right.
I have to. I was going to say feign masturbating. I don't know what sounds weirder. And even that, it's like, I realized I've now done it so many times on camera. It's a strange. You don't think it's going to be that big of a deal. You read it, it's actually kind of funny, or it's creepy, but it serves a story. It is what it is. And you don't even, there's not even doing it with another person. And then you discover in front of a crew of people with a camera on your face, knowing that, like, in all likelihood, millions of people are going to see this. You're simulating masturbation, and it's very. I have to say, sometimes those scenes are harder than with a person, because it's just like, all right, this is what I'm doing.
Private moment through the camera.
I mean, this is what I'm doing.
There's nothing distracting you from that camera being right there.
And it really, it's like the feelings that go through my mind, the feelings that go through my heart when I've had to do that is like, I'm not even sure exactly how to parse out how I do feel. But there's,
Right.
it's just, I don't know. It's all a work in progress. But I feel like I'm just imagining what a conversation with an intimacy coordinator would be like for a scene where it's just you masturbating. To be like, now, how? Yeah, I don't know. I don't know how that would be. I don't know how it would be.
Yeah. For me,
This is definitely staying in the episode.
Yeah.
Definitely. This is going to be the
long
promo on
conversation
Instagram.
about.
Wait, I actually wanted to ask one follow-up question to Penn. Penn, we can cut this or you cannot answer it, but you have an interesting story about the season 1, like the very first masturbation scene. Do you mind sharing it?
Is it that I did ask them to?
They wanted it to be more romantic, right? And you asked for it to be creepier?
Romantic's not the word. Romantic's not the word. I think every time I've done a masturbation scene, which is so far every season at least one, I've always gotten the note to make it less creepy. And I'm like, guys, they either say like close your eyes. They say like close your eyes or go faster or go slower. And I'm like, what? This man is fucking murdering people.
Yeah, I'm getting off on it.
And he's masturbating in the street. You're saying I'm making it creepy. How is it that I'm the one making it creepy? And so I think the way, I don't remember what I ended up doing. I don't remember what's in the cut, but from what I recall in the first masturbation scene in the first season, which is, to be honest, there's memes about it. It's kind of an iconic masturbation scene, I guess, at this point.
Right.
They say we can go ahead and shrug our shoulders and say, I gotta say, this interview is just taking so many turns.
David is just shaking his head in the background. He's like,
all not
"Oh
usable.
God,
This is
No,
all
it
not
was an iconic scene, and season 1 was such a phenomenon.
So
well.
I just remember like I wouldn't close my eyes, and the director came up, and he was like, "This is Lee Toland Krieger. I hope he listens to this and laughs." He was like, "Buddy, I think you gotta close your eyes."
This is where you draw the line on this murdering.
Yeah, and I was so, always have been, and I've been publicly conflicted about the role and all this stuff. And so I was principled, and I was almost kind of ready, and I was like, why? Why? And he was like, I just think it's not. I don't remember exactly what he said, but he was very graciously communicating that he thought it was creepy, and I was like, well, that's the point,
right?
Like, what
you don't want to romanticize it or make it seem less creepy than it is.
How do you soften it? Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
And I guess Ayo, and I guess that's just this strange line that we're always walking on our show, and I suppose many others are. Like examining toxicity in sexual culture while also trying to be sexy. That's just
Right.
Yeah.
Chase, it's
a
interesting
bit of
that
a
your
battlefield.
character is like revealed to be a creep in the same way. Like you think that he's going to be one way, and then it's like, oh my god, what? Yeah.
Yeah, like episode 1, it's like it's obviously very dark 180, but
That's right.
it was a delicate scene. Yeah, it was pretty weird. But yeah, so he's and you know the rest of it is a jumping off point for her, Starlight's character, you know, sort of the never meet your heroes thing, and then it's also for him to sort of get punished later and to see how deeply, you know, insecure he really is and where all that comes from. So
Chace, I read a review of I think it was season 3 that said that suggested that the Deep's storyline is it's become the most sympathetic or possibly the most redemptive. Having not seen the most recent season, is that your experience of it?
yeah, I mean, some people have an interesting response to this character. I just, you know, I chose not to judge it, obviously. I mean, I don't think you can really do something well when you're judging the character but I mean, they do, you know, in the first like few episodes, there's that scene, and then there's like the tonal shift of me like saving a dolphin from Oceanland, and like he gets ejected through the front windshield, and you know, but so I'm like, you know what, I'm just gonna try and play every scene and be as nuanced as possible, as real as possible, is what we always talked about. Just let the absurdity live, you know, speak for itself. And yeah, people either think he's, you know, such an asshole, such a creep, and then some people enjoy the comic relief. But throughout the past few seasons, yeah, he's kind of gone on this journey, and people are starting to kind of see him in a different light. It's really weird, yeah, and interesting. I mean, I don't think he can ever be redeemed on this show, you know, and no matter how many seasons. But
That's my line too. I always say that.
do you?
No, I'm serious. Like because I think when you start out with a bad character,
Right.
when you start out with somebody who's obviously bad, the only place you can, well, it's kind of like if you start out with somebody who's good, the only place they can go is down. And if you start out with somebody bad, the only place they can go is up. That's just the nature of storytelling.
That's the baseline.
It doesn't necessarily reflect real life, but it's, you know, that's storytelling with interesting arcs and stuff. And so I think
I do like it. Yeah.
No, go ahead.
Sorry, no, I was just saying, I do like that the writers of our show like to play in the gray area, you know, like as is human nature. There's nothing is really black and white, villain and good guy. And it does ask that question, can you forgive the unforgivable? Is the unforgivable, able to be redeemed? I mean, it's just, I do like that question is there, you know.
Are there good guys in your show? Because again, you know, there's rarely, I think, good, quote unquote, good guys in my show.
Right.
Is that, because I was just thinking, it's like we play in the gray area, and your show is like taking, it's taking the concept of a superhero and it's inverting it, right? Or I mean, I don't know what.
Right, it's subversive. It's really if Marvel characters were real and owned by an awful big corporation, and they were commodities and famous and Instagram, all this, and then the other side of it is the actual boys, which is just a vigilante sort of blue collar.
Those are the good guys, if anything.
Those are technically the good guys, but they're all murdering, comic book murdering assholes as well. So there's only like one, you know, you could say like decent human being in the show. But
who is that?
But yeah,
who is the decent human being?
Jack Quaid's character, sort of like the hero of this show that our eyes, you know, kind of see it through. Huey is sort of the main, you know, the main guy on that side of the spectrum. But yeah. But all the superheroes are just a narcissistic, evil, terrible people, you know, assholes. So, yeah.
I have a question, sort of a non sequitur. It's like taking us away and maybe a little bit back to middle school. But I mean, most people know the two of you and your relationship through Gossip Girl. I mean, we'll ask a couple questions about Gossip Girl, but taking it back, I know you were maybe like 20, in your 20s, early 20s, late teens when you filmed. But if you think back to middle school, like 12, 13, knowing yourself, Chace, and then also thinking about who Penn was in middle school, maybe he can share a little bit. Do you think you would have been friends in middle school? Like, just tell the truth. Be honest with us.
You know, I think there's a world, absolutely. I mean, I wasn't really, you know, I was sort of an everyman. I sort of like went in different circles. I was still also a little bit lost. Like I felt like I had some good friends, but it was tough to click with other people. I guess whatever the cool crowd would be in like 6th grade. But I do. I genuinely do. I think I had an ability to connect with good people, and I think Penn and I definitely connected over our time on the show. And I think there was a world where, there's only 110 kids, and it just kind of depended on who was in your class,
Yeah, that's true.
who was next to.
It was a 1 out of 110 chance.
Wait, Penn, what do you think? Do you think you and Chace would have been friends?
I think so. It depends. I mean, the sad thing about middle school is that it kind of depends on what you look like, because everybody starts just identifying each other. Well, in large part. I'm not saying that that's my nature or Chase's nature, but it is. And middle school is the like one time where I went through just physically like my most awkward phase that would kind of stay with me because I was quite chubby. And I was just... Yeah, I was just very sensitive, and I mean, I think I got along with everybody, but I did not have any close friends. I think I cherished the few times that I would hang out with people outside of school. Did you play sports, Chace?
I agree with you there. I mean, I did. I played even in Minnesota when I was young. I played Pee-wee football. Like tiny, but some of those.
That's right. You have a great arm, don't you? Don't you have like?
No. The thing is, like my dad, when I got to middle school, my dad was kind of like, listen, son, I don't think we're in Texas. I don't think you're going to grow much over 5'11" and 160, and so let's maybe. You like golf?
But wait, no. I feel like I remember you throwing a football at some point and just being like, because this is, I mean, you definitely, no, I mean, maybe not by your standard, which is like,
right.
very high, but like, I still don't know all the rules like when I watch football, I still don't know all of the rules, which gives you an indication of how I throw a football.
Penn, do you know that Chase's brother-in-law is like one of the most famous football players of all time, Tony Romo? I
forgot about this.
Can't throw a ball like Tony, but he's one of the all-time greats.
Yeah.
But,
brother-in-law.
It concerns me how I can forget things. No. I know he's not his brother, but I
I'm joking. I'm saying like it didn't pass on to Chace. Like there's no hereditary
but
link.
But Chace
there.
being from Texas,
no, I got none of that. Even my dad was a better football player than I was, but.
Wait, Chace, I have to ask, being from Texas and having your sister marry Tony Romo, did she just like automatically become the favorite child? She's just like forever your family's like crown jewel.
Tony became the favorite child for a while. and then it was their firstborn and then all the nephews, man. But no, we were all, those are fun times, going to those games. That was going on when in Gossip Girl sort of.
Yeah, no, I remember that, man. I mean,
Wow.
I'd forgotten, but I totally remember now. Yeah.
The picture.
Those were good times.
The picture I have of your parents, Chace, correct me if I'm wrong, but is like just from that little tidbit about your dad kind of redirecting you in the way that he thought you would be successful. And then your mom like dyeing your hair, getting the cool clothes for you, wanting you to fit in with all like the fashion pieces. I feel like they were really involved in your life. I wonder what your relationship was like with them growing up. What was your family life like?
Yeah, no, it was interesting. I mean, my parents were great. They did everything for, the sacrifice that they, I mean, they were so young. I can't imagine. It'd be like me having a 14-year-old right now. You know what I mean? I was on my dad's age now, and he's, grinding at work. I think they were very much wanting to set us up for success. And so, like any parent, you say you're going to be, let them be their own people and do all that stuff, but you desire so much for them, certain things. So yeah, there was definitely a pressure there or an expectation to do well in school and to work hard and to do all those things. I mean, my dad's definitely a type A doctor, grinder. He's a very hard worker, highly intelligent, and my mom was actually a teacher as well. Master's in education and caretaker, and was the fun teacher. But when we were in high school, she would sub sometimes, bring candy.
Really?
Everyone loves Dana Crawford. So
cute.
yeah, but I was a little disappointed by the football thing. I mean, golf was I know it sounds crazy and nerdy, but like golf's like kind of a big. a big thing down there. I took it seriously. I ended up playing on a team in high school, but I did miss that team. It was so individual. It was really, you guys, I mean, kids have to wake up so early. You do all the stuff, you do your homework, and then to go practice by yourself on the golf course for a couple hours after school was kind of a lot. And that sort of got to me a little bit. I missed the team aspect of a social person. I feel like I really need that in my life. So I felt like I was always searching for those connections. Sometimes the detriment of my own, I don't know if people pleasing is the right word, but I was willing to sort of almost be anyone to try and make those connections with other people. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I relate to
in
that
middle
for
school,
sure.
it was very a mercurial, type of a time. It was, probably the worst, probably really the worst time I think about it, just as far as feeling not. You know what I mean?
Yeah, man. No, that's really it. Let's just keep going there. That's. I mean, that is actually. I mean, this question of safety, I think, is huge. I don't know what more to say about it in this moment, but I mean, I do think going back to this maybe lighter question that Sophie had about like, would you and I have been friends in middle school? I know that I was just so desiring of a friend I could trust. You know what I mean?
Right.
That was basically all I wanted. And wherever that could have come from, I would have been open to it. But the way kids start clicking off is so intense. And depending on what sport you play, if you're good at it, if you happen to be conventionally attractive, all of these things, you just start forming these groups that you don't even really decide.
Right, right.
So let's see. When did you start playing golf?
I think I was about 11. Yeah, about 11, and then that.
And you're very good, aren't you? I mean, for like
okay.
no, but I mean, again, I feel like your standard is very high. When you talk about sports, you're like I feel like you're very good at them. I feel like you're better than all of us were. Like I'm just trying to remember. I feel like we were somewhere, and you threw a football.
He has a tattoo of throwing a football.
And I immediately felt like I was back in middle school, and I was like, "Oh shit, I can't touch that football." I can't. I don't know where this would have been.
I know that.
Yeah, sort of.
Barcelona.
That's right. Yeah.
No, I mean, I'm not nearly as good as Tony is at golf either. But no, it was one of those things that sort of is interwoven into the school experience, and people especially in Texas, put a lot of weight on competition, and there's just a lot of activity. Like I see all these kids, there's a lot of activities and a lot of sports on the weekends. There's a lot of that, and there's a lot of. I'm not saying my parents are, but the parents can get kind of caught up in this. Competition themselves,
we've seen Friday Night Lights.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. And that was not my experience at all. But there's a lot of weight put on competition in sports down there. Yeah, right. So it was, and I loved it. I loved actually being back on a team when I played it in high school. But I was kind of on the golf team, 7th grade, braces, the blonde highlights, and it was not my greatest phase. I mean, it's a very fragile phase for me.
Yeah.
Chase, I want to ask, I actually went to college in Texas. I lived there for 5 years.
Oh, wow.
And my impression of Texas, although it's the stereotype, I found it to be accurate, was that the two kind of weightiest things in people's lives apart from family were sports and religion. And I read that you grew up Southern Baptist, and I'm so curious about that. Like, what influence did that have on you? Sort of, where are you now with spirituality?
Right. No, yeah. So the school we went to is a Christian school. I actually don't know if it was any specific denomination, but Southern Baptist is obviously the biggest one. I mean, my mom's dad, who was actually her stepdad, but was her real dad for all intents and purposes, was a pastor down there in a small town outside of Denton, which is like about an hour north of where we grew up. But he was an amazing, almost godlike, father-like figure to me as well. Just like, I don't want to say Yoda, but he was just like, he was very he was just so amazing. And it was such a great resource to have him and his sort of guiding light through different times. But yeah, I mean, in retrospect, that was all we knew. I mean, it was, when you take Bible class in every grade and curriculum, you sort of get, it's a bubble. You know what I mean? It's a definitely a bubble. And, I connected with it in a real way then, and take a lot from it still, to this day. And I think, there's so many good things and bad things, and how religion can be weaponized and such a crazy, structure. You know what I mean?
For sure.
And that I think it loses people, and the people that subscribe to it can lose what it's really meant to be about, right? Which is either, personal relationship with Christ or what have you, that all these other things come into play. And as we're, even seeing, what's going on in the world now. I mean, it kind of can take
what's going on in the world?
What's not?
I don't know what you mean. First of all, I think religion is a safe topic for everybody.
Right.
Second of all, everything's gravy. What do you mean?
It's great. My voice just keeps getting higher.
She's like, Penn invited me onto his podcast, and he's asking about Me Too, religion.
Yeah.
We're just toggling between masturbation and spirituality and
all the big ones.
Oh man,
all the
greatest
topics.
hits.
No, I like it.
We're trying to set the bar high for our editor. You know what I mean?
I'm imagining. You said something, Chace, about how when you were young, you were just yearning for connection, and that might have been like to the detriment of your people pleasing. Tendencies. And I feel similarly. I feel like one of my biggest regrets when I look back at middle school is that I had sort of two groups of friends. One group was really like goofy, silly, young, like just relishing in the innocence of that time period. And then there was another group of friends who sort of just like plucked me. They just chose me. They were like all much wealthier than me. They were very popular. And of course, at that age, what's more enticing than, being part of the popular crew? And right. I went for it. I just like would ditch that other crew of friends often to be with this more popular group. And I look back and I think, that's one of my biggest regrets. I feel sad about it. I feel like I missed out on this other group had really just figured it out. They had figured out what was so special about being that age. I remember we were with
the
that
goofy group.
one
You're
time.
saying, wait, which
yeah,
group?
the goofy group. Like one of the things we would do was we would take like exercise balls, and I don't know how we had shirts big enough, but we would put the exercise ball in a big shirt, and then we would just run at each other and just bounce back. It's like that kind of thing, like that was so sweet and so fun.
TikTok too. I know you guys found it.
Yeah. So I really relate to what you said, Chace. I really feel that about middle school.
Chace, I also...
Sorry. I found these two good friends. One in particular, his name was Ford, and he was a very intelligent, funny kid. And him and I kind of became really close in those, I want to say 6th through 8th grade range. And he introduced me to a lot of great movies, the Monty Python movies, and anyway, great friendship, and still having like sleepovers and video games and stuff at that age. And then as high school moved on, the sort of the flow of the groups can change. And I always regret not, and it was on both. It wasn't like me drifting off. We both sort of we lost that. We lost what we had, and in middle school. And so it didn't really quite survive the course of high school, which was, I still, sometimes I think about that, those friends you sort of, I don't know, however they drift apart, but yeah.
I just want to ask you a couple more questions about middle school before we move on. I wanted to know, who did you idolize in sort of as like actors or musicians, and how did you get into acting?
Right, that's such a good question. What's funny is so I wasn't trying to be an actor or really do anything as far as music goes in middle school. So I wasn't I was probably at the time looking up to Tiger Woods, like those, he was like the Michael Jordan of like that time. It was like athletes maybe for me in a way. But that was actually when I first really just started to discover movies as well. Like I remember being too young to watch like Predator. My dad like showing me all these amazing like 80s and old movies, Midnight Run, all these. He's got a great taste in the classics and classic like 80s and some 70s comedies and whatnot. But Predator was like amazing and all these different things. I definitely got into as a kid, and that Matrix was like mind blowing in the sixth grade. But I think we're all, looking is also for that, like someone like a mentor outside of our family, outside of our dad or mom or dad as well. And I don't know if I've really found that. There was like one or two teachers maybe like in middle school and then in high school that I found. But, it's just those simple things where you're supposed to do all this schoolwork and kind of know what you want to do and be good at math and be good at all these things when you're also sort of dealing with falling in love for the first time or what your concept of love is at 15 or 16 and dealing with those feelings as well, which is a whole other ball game. And
so let's just go there for a second.
Yeah, let's go there for sure.
I mean, this is what was your first heartbreak in this time?
I was probably 14 to 15. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. 15 was when it like all came crashing down.
Wait, tell us about it to the degree that you're comfortable.
No, yeah. I just feel like it was a girl who was a best friend. We were really best friends. But I mean, back in the glory days of like dial-up phone with the cord and like you're on the phone for hours. You know what I mean? And it was just funny how you realize really quickly that like what you perceive to be reality could not be someone else's reality, right? As far as like, romantic feelings for someone else. And that was tough to have that correction happen. You know what I mean? I think I wrote like a really sappy, like note, you know what I mean? Like a page or maybe 3-page long, like crazy thing. And it probably like scared her off. But that was, I remember that being a very difficult thing to go through at that time while also juggling school, because at the time that felt like it was like the most meaningful relationship in my life as a best friend as well. So that was, and I didn't really have anyone to walk me through that either, which was interesting. Trying to have to like piece it together myself was tough. Yeah.
At that time, those feelings are so real. And I think sometimes we just forget. Like, we can be dismissive, like, oh, but you were 15. But, like, no, like, you're 15. Like, that also formed you. Like, that has, like, a profound influence on it can leave a mark
everything.
For years. Yeah.
Totally.
I mean, how
Yeah.
long, like, because I know stuff at that age, you think you can never get over it. Did you, because I feel like in my 20s and then early 30s, I was starting to realize things in relationships that came from these really bizarre ideas that started around this time and came from my first romantic experiences. I mean, how long do you feel like that first heartbreak left a mark on you? How long were you sort of grieving it?
God, that's such a good question, because at that age, you feel like it's so intense, right? Like you feel like, it's if you feel like time's forever when it probably was only like 5 months, maybe 5 or 6 months.
But that's a long time.
That's a long time. I feel like that left a mark on me probably for my entire high school experience. Yeah.
Wow.
And that can also, I feel like that can also shape the way you deal with rejection in the future. You know what I mean? It's an interesting thing,
For sure.
Were you, when you came to LA and you were acting, because rejection is such a huge part of acting, what was the shift for you coming out of? Did it feel like where you were from in Texas was a small town when you came to LA?
Yeah, it did actually. I mean, again, like Texas can be such a bubble. I mean, it was, and then I went to Pepperdine. I went to college, so I got out with the Pepperdine. And even that though was a small private, it's a religious school as well. Yeah, and I met 3 really intelligent guys happened to be from Texas, 2 from Austin, 1 from Amarillo as well, which was so funny. But then we obviously branched out, but they were so, I finally, I mean, and going to school from 5th grade from 10 to 18, I mean, those people know all the stories about you, you know what I mean? They know all the shit you spilled all over yourself at lunch, whatever. I mean, it's like you can be, I did feel freer. I finally felt like I was becoming more myself and branching out, sense of humor, everything, the things you connect on with those guys. And when you're like 17, 18 years old in college was good. But then I basically got to college and everyone felt like they knew exactly what they wanted to do, right? Everyone felt like an overachiever and it scared the shit out of me. I mean, I thought I just had I had a crisis as well. I was having a great time with these new friends and sort of finding myself. I was sort of like, I don't know what I want to do with my life. And I feel like I should know this. And I remember feeling that so strongly at 18, you know what I mean? You can't.
Well, you
really
also had it at 4 and 5 years old.
Right. Like, I mean, it was that. Yeah. I mean,
no. Sorry. I'm both making a joke and serious. Like crises of identity are very serious, and when you move and you're in these new environments, it's huge. It really. So. Sorry, I feel like I cut you off. I don't know if you can recall where you were going.
No. You're good, man. I guess the impetus for me, like finding acting, like in high school, I got into art. I was a drawer and a painter, and I loved photography. We did like black and white. Had a darkroom lab there, and those were some of my favorite classes. And so I always kind of had this side to me that was just creative. And I decided I took a year off of school. And while I was working, I was valeting cars, but I also ended up going to this acting class, and it was the Meisner technique, the repeat and everything, and the whole thing. It was so abstract and weird, and I loved it.
Can you explain this? Because I think a lot of people, I've actually never even done Meisner. I think a lot of people have heard about it but aren't familiar with it. Can you run us through it?
Yeah, I didn't do it for that long, but it starts off and it's a way to make you present. There's like exercise, like knock on the door exercises, right? And you basically, someone in the room picks an activity and the person walks through and it's all very spontaneous. You don't know how it's going to react, but you're supposed to just repeat back what the other person says. And you sort of let it flow from there.
Doesn't it just continue for a really long time? Like
you both
are repeating the same thing over and over?
Wow. Right. You start off just repetitions over and over and over, and then you introduce like observations about the person, right? So you can make an observation about that. And you realize you start to run the gamut of emotions with this person, and you're basically speaking gibberish, but you start to really connect in a present way. And it teaches you to just focus on the other person and have sort of a pliability to be versatile and to respond in a very like spontaneous way and sort of not have everything mapped out and be forced and all that. And I really loved it. It was kind of therapeutic and like this weird cathartic thing. And I thought it was great. And I was also armed with sort of like naivete and got a very small agent and started to send me out on auditions from there. And there was like 2 or 3 years of doing that.
So was acting really not on the radar before that? You were like, you came out of Texas, you were like dabbling in art, really interested in photography and drawing, and then this acting class came along, and then it was like just maybe a spontaneous or casual tangent you were on. I mean, where did you see it? Where did you think like, oh, this is what I'm going to do? Or did you think like, this is what's going to happen?
No, I mean, now? I guess at the time I thought this is something I can just kind of try to break out of my shell while also trying to figure out if I went back to school, like what I would do. Right. I mean, I guess in my head, I'm like, oh, let's go back and like do business or whatever, classes. And I did. I went back part-time, switched my major, and just continuously kept working and getting better feedback.
Wait, when you say break out of your shell, what do you, it's not like I don't know what you're talking about, but humor.
Right,
like what,
right.
Like what, like your shell, because this thing that so many people might assume of people who become famous, people who become successful, that there's not awkwardness, that there's no shell, or so just describe your shell a little bit. What was that?
Right. I guess, yeah. I mean, I guess I've always had that people pleaser thing in a way, like especially growing up in Texas and sort of, being taught to be polite and all this, that, and the other thing. But I guess the shell is more about finding your voice. And I still, to this day, you know what I mean? I think that's such an important thing to focus on, or at least be cognizant of, to meditate on that. Like, I have a voice, and I, you know what I mean? In sort of, in a whole spectrum of different ways, not obviously just your voice, but what do I care about? What direction do I want to go? What makes me happy? Instead of all this outside input telling you what you should do, you're trying to sort of realize that, don't listen to any of that. You know what I mean? What do
it's hard not to
inner voice say, and it's still very quiet at first, and then it's tough to find. I mean,
I think as an actor, it can actually be, it can make it trickier, because you think, my experience has been, I imagine you share at least some of this, that it's like, in some ways you're empowered, in some ways you're finding yourself, in some ways you're finding your voice, quote unquote, but in others you're literally giving voice to other people's words all the time. You're wearing clothes that are not yours. You're placed in a position where people assume they know you and they actually don't. And it can be a really, what's the word? It's like, not schizophrenic. That's like too, I don't know, but it's
disorienting too. Yeah.
It's disorienting. There's dissonance there because sometimes your voice can get lost in this avatar. And you can appear to be quite empowered in a few ways, but then you're quite disempowered, feeling at least in the ways that matter most. You can be like super successful, but kind of getting swallowed up in like somebody else's voice.
Well, I remember you talking about this too. I mean, we were so young when we did Gossip Girl, and I remember even talking to you after, like maybe a year or two after, we had all kind of gone, and you said something to the effect of like, oh man, yeah, like I'm still just sort of processing all of that, as I'm sure you are too, and you're always so intelligent and in depth. It made me, I'll never forget it, because it made me think, I was like, wow, maybe I haven't really like fully processed what we went through, because it was it really was crazy. I mean, that whole thing, people do feel like they know you, and they also feel like, hey, you have $1 billion and you're set and you have the perfect thing going, when it's really, there's all these other layers, interesting layers to it. And we were like, those were also kind of our college.
It was, yeah. I mean, we were still kind of kids when we got out.
Yeah.
Not entirely. I mean, I was 25, but it was, it was. I mean, I feel like I'm finally at a point where I'm able to reflect on specifically the Gossip Girl years, and like synthesize what I'm grateful for and what I can love about it, and just accept the frustrations I had at the time as just like the struggles of youth, being made extreme and magnified by having, I mean, when we first moved to New York City, our faces were on billboards in Times Square, and I remember at the time just being like, yeah, there's like that processing thing. There's no time to process it. 'Cause dude, I feel like from, what day was that? It aired on September 19th.
Wow. Oh my God, that's right. That was like the exact date, on a Tuesday. I remember.
Yeah. Because it was on network television. Yeah. And then from that day on, man, until that thing ended, I mean, has anyone ever stopped calling me Dan? Not really. Not really. That was 15 years ago. Yeah. And it's like, and I mean, but at least for those next 6 years, it did not stop. Like it was like every weekend we had a photo shoot, and then every hiatus we had either a project or some kind of press tour or some kind of, the first time I was actually in London was with you and Ed on a press tour when I was 21 years old. And I literally haven't spent I've spent only one other time in London until now working on.
I remember that
this
press
show.
tour. Yeah, that was fun.
Yeah.
We went to an Arsenal Tottenham game as well. That was
which by the way, when I mentioned that game to Tottenham fans, they're like, "Oh yeah, that was a bad day." Because I don't know if you remember, that was a 5-1 loss in a derby. That so Tottenham fans are just like they know that day. I mentioned it to a driver, and he was just like, "Oh yeah, that was a bad day."
I was scared. I was scared for my life. I thought there was like
we were in I know that
mean,
was actually crazy. It was a little nuts. It was like we were in the away section as Americans, and dude, I think you were either you or Eric were wearing a Yankees
the wrong
cap.
colors.
No. One of you was wearing a Yankees cap. I can't remember who it was.
No.
It was definitely Eric.
Even worse. Not even the right continent.
Yeah, and it just we just felt really out of place, and it felt like I really love that aspect of football culture here now, but then it was like the all the police were on horseback, like neon pink horseback.
Like combing the street, and you had to like, oh God, I gotta. Yeah. It's like Titanic. I'm like, Penn.
Let me on the door. Since you guys brought it up, I feel like we would be remiss.
Let's just talk about Gossip Girl.
A couple
for 30
of
minutes.
Gossip Girl questions. I have like a very specific one that I want to ask, but maybe actually Chace, sort of in this line of like processing. What can you share about sort of that experience? Anything? Yeah, positive, negative, whatever you're comfortable with.
Right. There was definitely a lot of negatives and positives, but I mean, it was so. How can I like make it succinct? I mean, it was just such a wild time. It was so novel as well. Like New York City, I have such like this romanticized love for. I still do. I'm like still in love with that city because of it. But we were given the keys to the city at a crazy time, and there was a lot of partying and and access to different things that you can sort of get caught up in.
Yeah.
That was at the same time okay in your early 20s and a lot of fun, but also you are kind of like Mickey Mouse to Disneyland. And people see you and you're like this character in this city. And
Wow, that's true.
That's actually funny. That's a funny metaphor. You are like Mickey Mouse at Disneyland. Which is to say you're a faceless person inside of a suit who cannot be seen or heard.
Yeah. That's deeper than we ever thought.
Who everybody's taking pictures with, and inside you're like,
yeah. And it did create, for me at least, I'm a little bit more on the private side. I mean, I'm
really
extroverted, but it created a little bit of paranoia. I don't know about you, Penn, but I feel like outside looking in, you feel like you dealt with it amazingly, but I definitely had gotten a weird paranoia.
Dude, no, but see, this is the thing. It's funny that you say. I think on the inside we had a lot of the same experiences, and then maybe in some of the most superficial ways we had slightly different experiences. Because like I never felt that whole keys to the city thing. I felt like it's so silly because it's not a sensitive topic, but at the time it was. I did not feel. I still felt like I didn't know how to get into the club. I didn't know how to get not on the show, but into literally the clubs. I remember because I didn't go out as much as the rest of the crew, and I often felt uncomfortable because I didn't feel like I was as easily able to get in. I mean, the one time I name dropped myself to get into, I did it once because like I wasn't being let in, and I was like. Man, and I was actually going out with Matt Settle. I was going out with Matt Settle, and he really wanted to have fun. And so we go to the box on like a Tuesday night or something.
Oh my God, yeah.
And we had just shot there. We had just shot an episode there.
Oh my God.
And I wasn't being let in, and I was just like, and I didn't really want to be there, but I was like trying to show Matt a good time, and so I talked my way in by showing them my IMDb. You know what I mean? Like, and see, this is what I mean. The story actually gets like kind of funnier and worse that I'm not going to tell on a podcast. But I'm like, this is, and I mean this in the best way, Chace. It's like I like it's funny because I actually feel like we can just laugh about it now. But
right,
like I suspect that you have never had to show a doorman your IMDb to get into a club. And I'm just saying that I have. And I don't know why it's different, because we're essentially on the same level. We should be the same in that respect. We're on the same show. You know, like what is that though? I don't like. Am I right or am I wrong? Have you ever had? Have you even?
It was because I went out way too much. Was the problem?
Everyone knew you by name.
Yeah, which is also another problem. I was jealous of you, and no, but I have shown someone at the grocery store my Wikipedia page because I didn't have my ID and I was trying to buy like a case of beer or something like that. And I was like, oh God, this feels weird. This my age is on. Does this count? You know what I mean? But, yeah.
That's right.
Oh no, but man, I know I hear you, and yeah, there was that thing of like. I don't know. It was also like that thing for me of like, I guess this is what we do.
This is what you do. Well, no, right. Well, actually,
like, this is how we be social, which kind of distorted my reality of that for those years afterwards. You know, it was
that's
like,
the people pleasing thing.
That wasn't real life. Like,
no,
that wasn't a normal Friday night. You know, like
no, wow. And we were in our own way ushered into these roles that everybody expected us to fill. You know. And I think, right. And I mean, what you're talking about, that people-pleasing thing, which again, like I very much have, I think a lot of actors actually naturally have this because you're trying to please a lot of people, frankly. Mm-hmm. And right. I mean, yeah, that's just something that you always struck me as, somebody who constantly found themselves surprised to be a center of attention and very uncomfortable with it. And
they're a very true assessment, dude.
Yeah, because and I mean, and I would imagine that started once you started growing. I know you couldn't, throw a snap. What do you say? How do you what? Snap? You snap a.
Throw a spiral.
We'll edit it, Penn. Say it again.
No, but what is it? You snap. What's the term? You say snap in a way. What's the term?
You take the snap and
I guess I sound like such an idiot right now.
Let's go back.
You said it again. Not us.
Again.
I'm just trying to. No, but really, like I feel like you because. Just the times that we did go out, and it was fun, by the way. I really loved going out with the crew because it would, but and I would regard the whole thing, and I just feel like you were in this really interesting position where you were like people think that I am, a symbol of something or objectified, and I think you have that experience even more, like even more than, and I mean I have it a lot, and I think so I don't know, man. I'm just saying, like I always really admired the way you just were so gracious with like virtually everybody in like every scenario, because I think that, and
man, yeah.
I it's not like, maybe it's not kosher for you to say, yeah, that's hard. But I'm saying I watched that and I was experiencing it myself, but you were experiencing it even more. And I think that, and I know what that's like. And I actually think that was hard. And I think you dealt with it really graciously.
Thank you, man. Yeah. I mean, it was, again, yeah, like it was just that thing of, and it was a lot of fun, I made some of my best friends in New York, Will and some of those guys. And obviously like Sebastian was out there at that time on the show.
Yeah. Sebastian's going to come on the show too, by the way.
Is he good? I was wondering if he was going to yeah, that's great, man. And we were all, you and all of us included, trying to find our way. But yeah, like, again, like that wasn't a normal way to meet, to make relationships, to meet girls, to do anything. It was so normalized. It's like, okay, I guess we're going to do this on a Friday night and get in anywhere, and kind of hop around. And that was, it was intense, man. It was a lot. And, and then after, when it all sort of ends, I kind of describe it like again, like an athlete or a quarterback or someone getting injured or ending their career like instantly, and your identity's just kind of pulled out, the rug's pulled out from under you. Like all those.
Jeez, I've never heard anyone describe it like that. That's incredible.
Yeah, like the hair and makeup girls, you wake up and Richie, the driver's out there, and you get to have your morning like jam session with him, and you're laughing and talking sports, and you get hair and makeup, and those girls are your therapists. We're all laughing. It was just such. I mean, we had. For all the crazy stuff we went through, we had such a good time. I saw Amy in New York, and she was just like, man, like we all really had some good laughs and good early mornings and good late nights on set. I mean, it was a special time, and to have that pulled away at the end of it too, for me, was really jarring to have to move back. Or I felt like I had to move back to LA. I definitely didn't, but to move back and be thrown in back there, I didn't handle it too well for a while.
Okay, I do want to ask my very specific question. So I have heard that you and Ed live together. And I remember actually when I heard it was like several years ago before I even met Penn. And I remember thinking like, why didn't Penn live with them? Obviously, I didn't know anything about like the industry. It's not like normal for actors to necessarily live together. But I have thought about it. And I've thought about how the plot of the first season was like Penn is lonely boy and Nate and Chuck are like, really good friends. Penn's the outsider, but Serena draws him in. And in real life, Penn and Blake were dating. You and Ed were living together. And I'm just wondering, like, how did that impact dynamics? And Penn, did you feel like an outsider?
Well, I survived for one thing. So that's good. But I'll tell you what it is. I remember what it was because we all got there. We're staying at the Ian Schrager Hotel. What is it? The Gramercy Park
the
Hotel.
Gramercy, which was, we shot the pilot and we stayed at the Gramercy. It was a beautiful hotel.
It was beautiful. An amazing little bar with a pool table down there. And we're all sort of getting to know each other. And
Chase is also killer at pool. Chase is good at all.
Chase is good at everything.
He's good at everything in New York. Yeah. But Penn was sort of late to the. We had heard they were trying to get him in there, and I mean, I don't think Penn showed up till like the day before shooting, or maybe we had already started filming, and so I had a little bit of time, right? And that what happened.
I actually think that's true. I forgot, but I think that's true. Yeah.
Yeah. And so Ed, we had simply just had a dinner, and I think Ed had never really spent any time in America. I didn't even understand New York prices, but we were kind of at dinner like, yo, do you want to it feels like we should probably, it's expensive. We should do you want a room together? And he was like, yeah. And he never even saw the place. Me and my mom went like the summer before after it got picked up, and third place we looked at, we signed. I had my dad like loan us the first and last months in security deposit and rent because we had no money. I mean, we had to like pay my dad back, and Ed never saw the place. He just showed up in New York, and we were sleeping. Like, I think he opened his suitcase and slept on it. Like the first night, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
So it was like that. We were like 18, 20, 19, 21 years old. But yeah. So.
Penn, did you feel like an outsider? How did that sort of dynamic play out?
I mean, yes and no. Not really. I mean, I'd already been in television for so long. I was like really unsure about whether or not I wanted to continue. And so I went into it being really unsure and conflicted, which is evidently my MO. And so I just was like, I think I was just socially anxious. I didn't necessarily feel like an outsider. I mean, that word now, I'm just imagining the way people will hear this and then interpret it.
I know, they'll be like, the headline will be like, lonely boy, actually
lonely boy, still lonely, still a boy, very lonely
please,
boy.
Let's not.
I'm texting Tansy right after this interview.
You do weirdly start to, in some ways, echo the dynamics of the show you're on. I don't know what that is exactly. That's like that's almost maybe more of like a niche psychological phenomenon that would be interesting to explore, but not here. It is. I mean, look, I don't think anybody can be cast that far outside of their quote unquote type. I mean, unless you're obviously playing against it for a reason, but I don't think anybody can really, I mean, until you're, I don't know, much older and you're like a committed character actor in some capacity. I think, when you're 19, 20 years old, you're going to get cast as some kind of version of yourself, but then made very two-dimensional and simplified. Mm-hmm. So I think we were all just conscious of, how people perceived us. That was definitely, I mean, the greatest struggle I had with Gossip Girl was simply that people thought I was like Dan in any aspect of me, that did resonate. Or did share anything with Dan that could then lead people to just ever more assume like, oh yeah, he is like his character. That is basically when you're on a show like that. And I'm not saying it's right or wrong. It's just it is like one of the most frustrating and disempowering feelings in the world, you know, to you. I'm not saying in the real world, I'm saying to you when you're going through it. It puts you back in middle school and you feel like these, you know, your feelings are all you have at the end of the day, in the beginning of every day.
And people don't realize that when they're saying it. They think it's like unintentional and harmless, and they're just like, oh yeah, you know, but it is. Yeah, you're right, man.
Yeah. So, I mean, for me, it's like, again, that was the processing. I just feel like I went into it already being like, oh shit, this is gonna be interesting, you know, and so that's why the second I got out of it, I was like, okay, I need to deal with that.
Right. We all did.
You know, whatever.
Yeah. It was very, very intense. And again, it wasn't, a lot of aspects of it weren't real life. I mean, you know, we were sort of on display out there for a while. So, yeah.
Penn or Chace, is there anything you want to ask each other that we haven't brought up yet?
I do. I go back to this one thing sometimes with you, Penn, but we've had, even as the show went along, I feel like we became better friends. I mean, I remember going to like Joe Bacco sushi dinners and he's just always a very, insightful, intelligent, thoughtful person. Are you single? And, but I do remember us sitting in a diner, and sometimes I started to like connect and vent to Penn, and I know he's been through a lot, with different things growing up. And so we were in a diner one time, and I was just talking and sort of word vomiting and venting and needing some sort of just support. And I don't know what the answer I was looking for, but I remember I'll never forget it because it's something I go back to, but you were just like, you know what, man? Like, and we were young. He's like, I've just learned that, as you get older, at some point you have to just like push aside all of those issues you have, whether it's family, people in your past, and just say fuck it and take responsibility so you're able to move on. And that was always such, and I'm sorry for, swearing.
No, you're allowed to. No worries.
But that I've always gone back to the power of fuck it. I mean, like, it sounds crazy, but like, it's like you were basically like, man, I know, like, we always try and do circles in our brains, trying to weed through different relationships, whether it's familial in the past or what. But he's like, I've just learned, as you get older, part of being an adult is taking responsibility, and no matter what that looks like. And that was always very powerful. You've said many insightful things like that, but I still.
It sounds like maybe I
was
had,
what stayed with you.
It sounds like somehow I had my shit together better then than I do now. Is that true?
You've always been this old, beyond your years.
You say old man. Say it, Chace. You've always been this old man.
Yeah.
Well, I love him, man. Yeah.
Oh, no, that's really sweet.
I think amongst the men on the show, I think you dealt with a unique pressure. I really do. And I feel like you dealt with it so graciously. We just know that the way it all kind of came down on Blake and Leighton was more than the rest of us. And then out of the men, you were the third. And, that's all. I just think like it's so good to see you doing well now. And like, I was even watching some bloopers of you on The Boys, and to hear you, one thing that we always said on set, this is not, Chace knows this, we were always like, the second this guy gets into a comedy, it's just gonna change everything. Because like Chace's sense of humor is still, I think, a little bit of an untapped mine. He has like this Jim Carrey-ish, like.
That's so sweet.
Vibe that is just until you know him, I don't know, I don't know that you can know it, but it's so nice to see you like doing well and happy. I don't want to make too many presumptions. We all got challenges, but I just it's nice to see you growing up and just owning it. Taking responsibility and fucking it.
That is where we should wrap. But we do have a last question.
Yeah.
It's tattooed on my back. Yeah.
Okay, so the last question that we ask everybody, Chace, is just if you could go back to 12-year-old Chace and just have 1 minute with him and tell him something, what would you want to say?
Ooh, that's good. I guess you could say, don't take yourself so seriously, for one. And that things have a way of working out. I think we're so entangled in fear at that age, in the unknown. It would be more of a comforting, it's all going to be okay, and something along the lines of don't sweat all the small stuff. You know what I mean? And life is short, so yeah, very
Love
deep.
that.
Love it.
That's so sweet.
Yeah.
Chace, if Sophie and I wanted to start a podcast about people's college experiences as like a rival to this one, would you host it with us?
Are you going to rival our own show?
It.
Awesome. I'll have my people reach out
We're
to you.
kind of done with Penn
An hour
now.
or two a week. Let me know.
Yeah.
That's great.
Great.
Yeah.
It was
If
so
it
nice
means
to
I get
meet
more
you.
time off, you guys
He's
can
like,
do it,
I'm for it.
frankly.
Yeah, so nice to meet you, Chace. Thank you
That's
so
awesome.
much.
Yeah.
Nice to meet you guys too. That was great. I love that conversation.